How about it, folks? Here we are, Washington and Oregon, members of the Big Ten. We saw it coming a long time ago. They put in for application last fall, and here we are. And though expected, it's still a bit of a shake to the system if you enjoy college football, if you love college football, if you enjoy the tradition and you're a purist, a traditionalist. This is a historic day because this is the end of the Pac-12. It's just got to be at this point. So we'll focus on the Big Ten. We'll focus on the Pac-12. We'll go to each and every new member of the Big Ten, new member of the Big 12. We'll look at this from every conceivable angle as we have for, I don't know how many hours we've been live going back to last Friday and going back to last week with Colorado joining the Big 12. But my goodness, it is nonstop. And before the plane is landed, there are a number of twists and turns, of course, because we heard earlier Oregon, Washington, Clemson, Florida State, Oregon, Washington. Maybe that's the first step of two. Maybe it's going to be Clemson, Florida State, but obviously that's a huge legal issue with the grant of rights. Maybe it's Cal, Stanford. Maybe it's Notre Dame. So this could be a one-time addition, much like USC and UCLA, or this could be a plan that is unfolding. We can dice it up from a number of angles. We will continue to do so. It brings to mind the conversations that we've had over the last few days of a number of videos that I posted 3 or 4 months ago where I lined up Washington against the Big Ten and said, here's how the Huskies have done against the Big Ten. This is my projection of how Washington will fare in the Big Ten. Same thing with Oregon. Same thing with Arizona to the Big 12. And I lined up a Big Ten, got to dust off that video, with a 20-team conference, with the divisions, with the pods. Here we are. It's amazing. This is, sure, history's made in college football to a certain extent every season, of course, every year on the field, and it's made a couple times a decade overall. But this type of shakeup that we've seen now going back 2 summers, historic. Beyond historic, unprecedented. And again, it reminds me of a conversation we had just the other day. Money being amplified makes this possible. This would not have been possible, nor would it have been conceived in earlier generations and in just the last few decades, because the money did not make sense for schools to be connected. So the information age, in which information can be shared around the world instantaneously, has made this possible. Otherwise, it didn't make sense for schools to be connected and to play athletics against each other. But with the ease of travel, with the information age being instantaneous, and now with the money being to where decades ago, it might have made sense to move, let's say, to one of the power brands, but it would only profit you a certain amount of money. Therefore, you wouldn't make that move because it would disturb everything else in play. Now, the money dictates because the money is so heavy and the differential between conferences is so great. And now the Pac-12, as we discussed earlier today, check out the live stream that we posted starting at 9 a.m. Eastern time. You know, it's got to be important when the voice of college football is going live at 9 in the morning to talk about the Pac-12's misdeeds and their missteps throughout all of this. I believe that circumstances worked against them in a few cases, but 80% 90% of the decisions that were made and the turning points in all of this over the last 2 years, the Pac-12 made bad decisions and others have benefited. We will talk it up right here at the Voice of College Football. We left the link in the chat if you'd like to call the show. We have also left the link on Twitter. I will repost the link. Would love to hear from you. I can go on and on about this for days and days and days, but I've got this platform all the time, so certainly want to hear from you. We will read the direct report coming in from Pete Thamel at ESPN, and we will then go to your comments and questions right here at the Voice of College Football. Please use the Amazon link when you go shopping. Use the Amazon link in the description section of all the videos. We hope to have some guests show up here soon as well to talk about various angles. Again, this is something that keeps on giving for a number of reasons. There's so many different components to this. There's the timeline, which is fascinating. The most fascinating timeline is the Pac-12 timeline, because anytime there's a train wreck, that becomes the most fascinating. There are the television and media rights deals that have played into all of this. There, of course, is the competition on the field and projecting how these schools will do in their new conferences. There is the thought about the existing teams in the conference and how well they will do and how they will be impacted by, in this case, Washington and Oregon. And then we've got the next punch. What is the counter punch to this? What's the SEC doing? What's the SEC thinking at this point? Because as we talked about the other day, the Big Ten seems to be at an advantage to a certain extent in going to both directions, east and west, north and south, to get possible prospective members into the conference. While you would think that the SEC simply has Florida State, Clemson, and Miami to target, possibly North Carolina. All right, from Pete Thamel, Oregon and Washington are finalizing a deal to join the Big Ten, a move that continues to dwindle the Pac-12. Okay, the schools are expected to formally apply for membership Friday. That comment I don't necessarily understand, because the formal application went in, or an application of sorts went in last fall. We know that Washington and Oregon applied for the Big Ten, and then we know that it was vetted and cleared a couple months ago. Regardless, the Big Ten vote is expected to be unanimous for them to join in 2024. So this is going to happen like now, next season, 2024. We've got 2023 just 3 weeks away. We got football coming. We can talk about football and watch actual football in 3 weeks, but only one season away, only 1 year away. Wow, the Pac-12 has gone from 10 schools just in a few months, with the prospectus of San Diego State and SMU, and it being a clear path to replace USC and UCLA, not replace the brands or the popularity, but replace them, at least in number, to a complete and near disintegration of the league. So the league will be down to 7 schools now. And when you get down to that teetering point, as we talked about 2 years ago with the Big 12, Brett Yormark acted when his league went from 10 to 8 and the 2 most important members were gone. He acted before anybody else could flee, could scurry, could run. He acted. Now, to the Pac-12's detriment, these 2 commodities are valuable. So they were valuable enough for the Big Ten to pounce. On the other hand, the Big 12 did not have any entities left out of those 8 schools that were valuable enough that the SEC or the Big 10 wanted them. So, as I've stated many times, I know Big 12 fans, you don't want to hear this, but it's actually a good thing. Your league is too mediocre to be picked apart. So you are and have gained stability and security through mediocrity. Finances of the move are not immediately clear, but both Oregon and Washington will receive only a partial share. So the numbers that have been floated out there are somewhere in the range of $38 to $42 million. So think about this. I don't remember off the top of my head what the current Pac-12 deal pays each school. The Big 12 new deal that goes into effect next season is at $31.7 million. The ACC's is collectively behind that, but it's actually escalating per year and will pass the Big 12 at some point, but it's still minuscule compared to the Big 10 and the SEC. Those numbers, it depends on which accounting firm you're listening to, because the totals are skewed in so many different ways, but generally somewhere between 75 and 90 million for the Big 10 in particular. So this proposed Pac-12 deal, and for as much as we like to jump on George Kliavkoff, the Pac-12 commissioner, he presented a deal. Now, was it a good deal? We don't know. We know it involved Apple and almost exclusive streaming. So there must have been some cable distribution there, maybe one game, maybe two games a week, but the bulk of it was streaming. It was rejected by Pac-12 presidents, and Colorado had already bailed, knowing what that was going to be and what that deal was going to look like. And of course, with Oregon and Washington already applying for membership to the Big Ten and having a good idea of what that deal was going to look like, this is a no-brainer for them, even though their percentage could be compromised here. So people in the know are estimating that Washington and Oregon's share will be about half. We shall see. But it's still so much better than what they would get otherwise. Their move to the Big Ten in profiting them, let's say $40 to $42 million per year, is still $10 or $11 million more than they would earn per season in the Big 12, plus the added exposure. CBS, NBC, Fox is so much better than what they would find in the Big 12, even though the Big 12, good conference, nice conference, competitive situation, ESPN contract, they're good to go. They still have Fox. So the Big 12 is in a good place, but Oregon and Washington clearly wanted to play in the big leagues. All right. The television deal runs through 2030. The move would push the Big Ten to 18 schools starting in 2024, including a west wing of USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. We would have to work out a plan of pods. I have done that. I'll have to dig that up and look at that and see if it still applies. But it should, USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. So if you've got 20 schools with 5 pods, it can be distributed very evenly in terms of competitive balance. Okay, the departures put Oregon and Washington's former conference, the century-old Pac-12, 1 century of athletics, now down to 7 schools. Arizona State, Arizona, you got to think that they're going Big 12 along with Utah. That was the big news earlier in the day. If you were joining us here at 3 p.m. Eastern time, you were going to see something like that, because we talked about Arizona going Big 12 this morning, and the rumors are Utah and Arizona State are closely behind. And then you have no more conference, and then you've got the Mountain West picking apart. Certainly, Washington State and Oregon State seem destined to the Mountain West. There just seems no way around it that they're going to be playing in the Mountain West. I don't see any other viable option. Stanford and Cal seem as though there is no, wow. Can you see it from a culture and institutional standpoint, Stanford and Cal in the Big 12? I can't see it. So maybe Stanford and Cal, the next wave to the Big 10. Maybe I can't see them in the Mountain West either. I served up this possibility a couple hours ago. How about Stanford becomes an independent? I'll have to do a little research and math on that. But in terms of putting together a schedule, Stanford could put together a schedule. We have independent schools like Army and UMass right now, and UConn. Stanford could be an independent. Now, I don't know what those other schools' TV deals look like, but we know that Notre Dame is somewhere in the $25 to $30 million range, somewhere in that vicinity. I would think that the other ones are, it's the dollar figure isn't even worth discussing. So I would think that Stanford, if they're proportionate to Notre Dame's poll, would probably get maybe 12 to 15 million per year by themselves. But then again, the consideration is, what would their schedule look like? All right, let's go to the phone lines. We got Mikey G on the line. He's got much to say about this, I'm sure.
Hello, Mark. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah. Well, you might be surprised. Yeah, I guess to have some finality, that's a good thing or whatever. But, this is a huge, huge blow to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it's, as an Oregon fan, I think you're met with a lot of different ways to look at this. Obviously, it's good to be on stable ground for once. This past 12 months or so has been kind of rough. But you're thinking about Oregon States, you're thinking about Washington States, you're thinking about the NorCal schools, what's going to happen to them, or this whole thing is just so bizarre and really sad. So I think that that's where I'm at, both mentally and emotionally right now. Is just kind of like it's very sobering. This is the direction. I mean, in this reality that we're living in right now, this is the safest direction for Oregon to go. So in that respect, I'm happy. But in terms of what the sport is turning into, not a big fan.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So I think, unfortunately, for those people that root for a have not, they may be left in the dust or competing somewhere where they don't want to be. For you and for others, hey, it's nice that you found safety and you found security and prosperity and all that. But yeah, if the second part of this, and maybe the most important, is the quality of the sport nationwide. And I just think that this doesn't work long term for the good of everyone involved. And we can kind of blame our modern age and technology. These kind of things weren't considered before for a number of reasons. It wasn't a business, even though they were making a lot of money. Let's say 35, 40 years ago, there was a ton of money being made. It was still, this is driven by schools and institutions that also have athletic programs and football programs. So they're going to continue to do what they do. The information age makes it so easy to be connected to anybody across the country at any time. And again, the money has just made it overwhelming to these schools and these conferences to get together, as opposed to where years ago, yeah, there would be a benefit to playing in a higher profile conference, but it wouldn't be that significant because to undo all the other connections within your region. But now the money is so amplified that it overrides everything else.
Yeah, I think back to really my youth and being a Duck fan, and this is pre Joey Harrington and influx of Phil Knight and everything. And I think about how I was being exposed to things like the Miamis of the world and the USCs of the world, and just always kind of having this yearning to get that notoriety and get that exposure. And you were lucky to get one game a year on television as an Oregon fan back, pre 2000, I guess. Not necessarily that recent. I'd say.
Hopefully Mikey G can come back and spend some time with us. I was interested to hear what he had to say. This is the result, everyone. This is the result of not having a commissioner. This is the result of not having a governing body that governs the entire sport. You would not see this in the NFL. The NFL doesn't sabotage itself. The NFL does what's best for the entire league. The owners know that even though a particular move may not benefit them specifically in that particular case, they still vote in that direction because they know that what comes around goes around, and what is good for the league is good for them individually. So I know college football fans don't want comparisons to the NFL, but this is one way in which college football should be like the NFL. And now it's probably too late. Is that there should be a governing body, there should be a commissioner, and then there would be cooperation between everyone to do what's best for the sport. Now we have isolated, and we have, what is the word I'm looking for? Disenfranchised certain fan bases. If you're an Oregon State fan and you get relegated to the Mountain West Conference, okay, you're still playing football and you're still playing a high level of football against some good programs, but you've reached a place where you finished in the top 15 in the nation last year. You had 10 wins. You want to compete for a Pac-12 championship this year. And there's going to be, man, I was thinking about what the scene was going to look like at the USC UCLA game this year, knowing that these two storied programs, one of them who owns the conference and the other one who is their running mate, their rival, and who is probably currently the fourth, fifth, sixth best program in the conference and historically better than that, and that own that TV market. And it's overall through the years, this changes and fluctuates. That has been the crown jewel game of that conference, much like Ohio State, Michigan, maybe not necessarily to that degree, but USC and UCLA. How eerie it's going to be watching USC and UCLA. I was thinking that before all of this transpired, knowing that this was possible, but thinking, man, that's going to be an eerie setting at the Rose Bowl or the Coliseum watching USC and UCLA. Mikey G, I don't know how much of that you heard, but just knowing before the recent developments that USC and UCLA were leaving, I've been thinking this entire offseason that their game was going to be the setting, the environment was going to be a little bit eerie, that knowing these are their final games, this is the final game for those two teams in the Pac-12. And now the entire season is going to be eerie, and especially those closing weeks in all of those locations.
Yeah, I mean, it's must-see TV, right? I mean, how ironic that the Pac-12 is going to get their boon basically before their grave. And it is what it is, Mark. I understand that this is the direction of college football, but the point I was making earlier was, be careful what you wish for, right? Because back in the day, as an Oregon fan, all you really cared about was getting that exposure, getting that notoriety. Here we are, getting that in spades, but football feels so much different. And that's just kind of, I guess you kind of sense that would eventually be the case. I mean, I think even during the BCS era, there were hints the way that college football was going in terms of the national championship and the fandom just so clearly on a national stage. Before the BCS, it wasn't about really natties. It was about, can we win our conference? And the way that these networks have spun it in a way, and it's twofold, right? You have, like what you were saying, the age of the internet and bringing information to availability to everybody. And I didn't know anything about, the ACC, or really, I paid attention to SEC because I had a close friend that was a Kentucky fan, and he schooled me on all things SEC. And so that whole conversation about Pac-10, at that time, Pac-10 and SEC, it was very heavily debated between the two of us, but it was an apples to oranges comparison. I mean, at that time and still today, the SEC prides themselves on defense, and you win championships with defense. We could talk ad nauseum and about how that's evolved over the years, but my point is that it's now national. It's no longer regional, and so the national model is what's happening. It is coming to fruition, and this is just another step in the direction. So I understand it, but it doesn't make me like it.
It makes it difficult for fans to travel to road games. They're not regional. They're not down the road. And so it makes it very difficult without certain resources to travel for road games. And the point that I was making when you dropped off for a minute there was that this is all a result of not having a commissioner or governing body. And I've been pounding that home for years and years and years, because they would be looking out for the sport. But you can't blame any one entity, even though the result hurts and the result is not good for the sport. The Big Ten commissioner is doing what's best for the Big Ten. The SEC commissioner is doing what's best for the SEC. Big 12. Everybody's doing what's best. They're fulfilling their role and their job to do what's best for their conference. They're not looking out for the sport. They're looking out for their conference. Absolutely. That's what they are paid to do. But the NFL, for as much as a lot of college football fans get on here and they rail on the NFL and don't like the NFL, again, the NFL has it right because they're running a business that needs to serve and help everyone. So they don't make decisions that help just the NFC East. They work and partner together to help everyone.
Right. Well, and I think that, and I'm preaching to the choir here, I recognize that, but I think that the failure of both the leadership of these institutions and network television is that they did not protect the sanctity of college football. They instead exploited all of the things that we really love about it, which I think put us on the path of being an NFL model. And what I mean by that is the regionality is important to college football. That is a distinct difference between the college football and the fandom of college football and the
Absolutely.
NFL. And so the fact that they didn't protect that is a huge failure. And when you get the money and power involved, this is what happens. And so, yeah, it's like I said, I'm just being reflective today. I'm thinking about all of the wild, Pac-12 after dark games. As much as Oregon fans will not miss playing Stanford and how many times they've taken us out of the mix, who's to say that Rutgers won't be the the new Stanford for us or whoever? So it's just a crazy day. I'm trying to just reminisce and be thankful for the times that we had in the pack. I'm thinking of guys like Connor, like that dude has been back the pack the whole time. Who knows what they're going to do in Corvallis in this whole situation. But it just sucks, Mark. You know that.
Yeah, it does suck. And I totally get your point and back your point on the NFL and that being the way this is all going in so many ways. The transfer portals, free agency, NIL is a form of pay and all of
Right.
it. And I don't discount that as being valid for the student athletes. And then now we have all of the organization structural changes that again rip at the fabric of college football and the regionality of the food and the music and the styles of living and the cultures and everything that is gone. Uh, but the one way that they should have modeled the NFL was to uh, govern the sport collectively.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
Mikey G, anything else? Some calls are piling up now. So, but is there anything else you'd like to hit on?
No, Mark. I think that you'll probably get to it. I'm curious, I mean, the SEC, they have the luxury of being pretty mum through all of this, but I'm curious what their next moves will be, if any, in the whole ACC situation. But I know that will also be talked about in great length in the coming months too, or hopefully not during the college football season. But in any case, Mark, thanks for having me on. Go Ducks, and RIP the Pack.
Thanks, Mikey G. Got Tony Siracusa on the line from Last Word on College Football. I will just mention that as the chess pieces come off the board, I believe we've only got 4 left that I think move the needle. And I'm talking from a football standpoint, but obviously the brand and the popularity and the eyeballs move with the level of football play. Typically, you got Clemson, Florida State, Miami in the ACC. You've got Utah to a lesser extent in the Pac-12. Not that they're not as good of a football brand right now, but less eyeballs for Utah. But those would be the 4 left that I would think in any way would move the needle, other than, of course, Notre Dame. Tony, how you doing today?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing fine, but
it's crazy keeping track of all of this.
I know, it's insane, isn't it? I've changed the title of this particular live stream 3 or 4 times because and then things move so quickly.
Right.
Nobody even wants to talk about maybe Arizona right now because that was 5 or 6 hours ago that people were talking about Arizona to the Big 12. That's old news.
Yeah, you're right. It's Arizona seemed like a fait accompli, 24 hours ago. The fact that they haven't officially left yet seems to be escaping people. I think it's a given that they are going to go. I think that the communication that exists among the university presidents within a conference. Oregon and Washington probably would not have gone if they didn't think others were also going. I think that it is inherently tied together, at least a little bit. There is, not to sound overly dramatic, but I think there's a little bit of not wanting to be the last nail in the Pac-12 coffin. I think schools don't want to be responsible for that. I think that's why you probably haven't seen Arizona announce yet. I think they're waiting for the Big 12 deal with Arizona State and Utah to also come to fruition, so that there's the three of them going together as a unit instead of a school, moving the needle without anybody else. Once you get Arizona, the Big 12 has an even number of universities again. So then you need another two to come along. And I think it's probably Utah and Arizona State. Michael Crow from Arizona State seems to have been reluctant, one of the reluctant presidents to pull the trigger. We have today, this morning, it was clear that George Kliavkoff went with the idea that, to the meeting with the presidents, that here's the grant of rights. We're ready to go. Agree on the deal. We'll sign the grant of rights, and then we'll move forward with the deal. He only got 2 schools that were willing to sign the grant of rights out of the remaining 9 that were there.
Should I guess what 2?
Go ahead.
Washington State, Oregon State?
Yeah. Once he lost Michael Crow, because as of yesterday, Crow at Arizona State was still on board with trying to stay with the Pac-12, keep it alive. He was a supporter of the Larry Scott era. He was a supporter of the Kliavkoff era. He wanted to try and keep everything together. Once you lost Crow, the game was over. That was it. 2 out of 9 willing to sign the grant of rights. And my question was, a grant of rights for what exactly? Because this media deal has a non-guaranteed dollar amount. So what exactly are you guaranteeing that the conference will own if you leave early? This is the equivalent of, the kid who comes to my door knocking on the door selling magazine subscriptions, and he gets a cut of whatever he sells. That's what this deal with Apple Plus was the equivalent of. You get your money based on an increase in subscriptions. It was a ridiculous deal, especially for a tier 1 media rights deal. And those sirens are not coming for me. The sirens that my microphone may be picking up.
They sure are now.
They are not coming for me. It was a ridiculous deal. And the fact that George Kliavkoff had 2 years as commissioner, and this was the best he could come up with, is unimaginable. It truly is. There's a lot of, if you're unhappy with the fact that this has happened, and I get how a lot of college football traditionalists are unhappy. I am an old school college football traditionalist, as you know. There's a lot of blame to go around, but a lot of it still sits. It's the TV networks. It's, wanting to move schools around for the money. It's a lot of people. It's the schools themselves, but it still begins with the administration of the Pac-12, Larry Scott, and then George Kliavkoff, for being in a situation where these schools didn't have a lot of choice. When I was reading a lot of my colleagues on social media this morning saying, well, hang on, the Pac-12 may be staying together, there's a lot of reluctance. My question repeatedly was, staying together for what? This Apple TV deal is not going to be a viable solution for a 5-year media deal. It just isn't. And I think we talked about this the other night. Two of the things I look at, being an athletic director at a university where your major revenue source, your media deal, is TBD every year because it's based on a subscription set that you don't know how much money is coming in from year to year. How are you supposed to create your revenue budget and your expense budget based on a hypothetical from year to year? That is no way. You can't run a high school program like that, much less a major university athletic department budget like that. The second part was the actual coaching, how does a coach sit in a recruit's house, right? Let's say he's a football coach. Let's say you're Jed Fish at Arizona, and sit there and say, yeah, you know what? You're not going to be on ESPN. College Game Day ain't coming to see you. You're not going to be on Fox Big Noon or any of the other Fox games. Hey, but if your parents pony up for a premium subscription on Apple TV to watch you, hey, we get a cut of that. And, so that's all good. How do you sell that to recruits? To sign this deal would have gutted recruiting efforts for Pac-12 schools. It would have gutted the recruiting. Doesn't matter how much NIL money you were getting. Kids want to be on TV. As a matter of fact, it's counterintuitive to NIL, because if you're not on TV, you're not branding yourself or your university when people have to pay extra money just to find you on their obscure setup. It was a horrible deal. And the fact that this was the best that Kliavkoff could get, no linear partner, no nothing else. I mean, we were laughing weeks ago about the CW. Hey, at this point, the CW would be better than this. I get where a lot of people say it's a sad day. I grew up, you and I have been through this in the years that we've been doing this together. My first college football game was in 1972. It was the Pac-8. The Arizona schools were still in the Mountain West at the time. And on that third Saturday in November, if you were on the West Coast, you woke up making sure you watched the Ohio State-Michigan game, and then you went to the UCLA-USC game, and those two games, more often than not, determined who was going to the Rose Bowl. Look, that was changing anyway. The Rose Bowl starting next year is part of the expanded playoff system. That was going away. Like it or not, this is the reality, and you adapt to the change or you get left behind. And I feel sorry for the Oregon State fans. I feel sorry for the Washington State fans. Stanford and Cal, I assume they're going to wind up as independents. I mean, I really think that that's where they're headed. Oregon State and Washington State go to the Mountain West, and that's that. You've only got 4 schools. Once the 4 corner schools are officially gone, there is no amount of expansion in George Kliavkoff's thought process that's going to salvage this.
Stanford, Cal, independence. I thought of that yesterday. I threw that out yesterday. You don't think that the Big Ten wants those schools? Because I can't imagine that they don't want to join the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think that they fit in really well with the Big Ten. I think that the Big Ten presidents are reluctant to expand to another 2. They had to be kind of pushed into, and while, yes, there was a unanimous vote to go ahead and authorize Tony Petitti to negotiate with Oregon and Washington, it was specific to Oregon and Washington. It wasn't go find us 2 more teams, whichever 2 they are. And there seems to be a numbers reluctance. I think Stanford and Cal would fit in well. Certainly Stanford, I know that when we're talking outside the realm of the West Coast fan base, Stanford is the most successful athletic program in the country. Stanford, UCLA, and USC among them. have more than 300 NCAA championships, which is more than any individual conference has on its own. So there, and Cal would go along as basically their tag along partner. Certainly they fit in academically immediately. They would supersede many of the Big Ten schools the minute they walked in the door in terms of academics. But I'm not sure that there is the readiness from the current Big Ten presidents to go from, basically they would be adding 6 over the course of a calendar year, having added USC and UCLA June of last year, and then getting 4 more. I'm not sure they're ready for 6. I'd like to see it, because I think from an economic standpoint, it helps the conference. I get that, we're talking about the escalator clause in the TV deal doesn't necessarily give Stanford and Cal a full share. To the best of our knowledge, Oregon and Washington probably aren't getting the full share right away either. But you're eliminating some of the financial concerns having to do with extensive travel. The more West Coast partners you add, for UCLA, you're really adding them for UCLA and USC. They were the first 2 from the West Coast you took. You add a few more that those schools are going to play each other as part of a West division bracket, whatever, within the conference. You're helping yourself financially. You're helping those schools financially. So I would like to see it happen. I just don't know that there is the appetite to do it anytime soon.
I don't know if you heard the previous call, but I've made this statement a number of times that the sport is going in the direction, as we've all talked about, modeling the NFL in so many ways. The transfer portals, free agency, NIL is pay, and now you have the regionality being dismissed, and just this collection of teams and conferences that don't make any sense, that are just because they were commodities. The one way, though, that college football could have been saved was to have the NFL model at the very top and actually have a governing body to look out for the sport, to do what's in the best interest of the sport.
They don't have that. They're not going to have it anytime soon, because the NCAA has been gutted by its own knife, because of the way that it didn't get out front of NIL, the way it didn't get out front of the transfer portal, and have sensible governance under Mark Emmert. You then wind up with the Supreme Court cases and an NCAA that is so gun shy of everything that is happening, it's afraid to get sued. There are still actually more cases against the NCAA in court, and you're not going to get much action out of them right now. I think that when you look at the new commissioner and you look at how he's looking at Congress to help with NIL. Congress has a bunch of bills. I know that a lot of my colleagues have looked at these bills and said, oh, well, this won't work, so the bill is garbage. This won't work, so the bill is garbage. That's fine. That's not the way Congress works. What's ultimately going to happen is several of these bills are going to blend into one bill. They're going to take, this doesn't work out of this one, this doesn't work out of this one. You blend bills together, and there may someday be a bill that gives governance to NIL and gives the NCAA a little bit of power to enforce it. That's a ways down the road. I think that right now you're looking at an NCAA which is being outflanked by state legislatures, and really not sure what to do with it. Kind of sitting there throwing up their hands looking for help.
Now, in your neck of the woods, that ACC conference, there's only 14 teams. What's wrong with that? That's not the future here. 14 teams in a conference? That's crazy. You can't only have 14
It's going to be a
teams.
minor conference at some point. It's too small, and you've got Florida State who can't wait to get out. They've got their own challenges. mostly mostly a byproduct of the hostage document, otherwise known as the Grant of Rights, that goes until 2036. So there's, they've got a lot of their own challenges. There are people who I talk to within the structure of the conference on a regular basis who feel certain that the conference will stay as constructed through the Grant of Rights term, which I think is one of the most naive ideas ever. In 12 months, Rutgers is going to be making double the television revenue that Clemson and Florida State do. If you're the ACC and you think you're just going to ride out the next 13 years and everybody will sit still, you're going to be the MAC, is what you're going to wind up being. You're going to be the financial equivalent of the MAC.
That, and also, while you have guaranteed, let's say the Grant of Rights is rock solid binding and there's no way to get out of it, what you have determined is we're going to have let me do the math. You're going to have a 13-year conference. You're determining, while we are rock solid secure for the next 13 years, we have no chance of extending past that.
Correct.
We are basically telling all of our schools, we don't care for you. We're not going to work for a better solution to this competitive imbalance. Therefore, we're ending our conference in 2036.
Yeah, and I see the question that you put up on the screen here about the Grant of Rights for the ACC. Look, it's not in the ACC's best interest. And when I say the ACC, I mean the commissioner's office. It's not in their best interest to negotiate and let somebody out for a price, because once you've done it for one, you're going to have to do it for a few. The dollar figure to get out, period, is $120 million. On top of that, you lose your TV rights to your home games, so 6 games a year for the next 13 years. The dollar figure estimate there gets you to somewhere around $300 million. The $120 million to buy your way out is doable. It's a lot of money, but the Florida States, Miami's, Clemson's, whomever can afford it. Wake Forest and Boston College cannot, but plenty of others can. The issue is the conference is not going to say, okay, for $300 million, we'll let you out. Because again, once they do it for one, they got to do it for a few others that can afford it. So you are looking at years of litigation, a year to year and a half of litigation. There is one, maybe two elements, small procedural elements in the contract that are challengeable, having to do with the conference maintaining financial competitiveness on behalf of its schools. Once I joke about this. I'm not a lawyer. I just play one when I get in trouble and have to go to court. There's a lot of people who say, well, if they could have sued, they would have sued already. No, it doesn't work like that. You can't sue just because you're upset. You have to have a legal cause of action showing some sort of harm, showing some sort of damage to yourself to file this civil litigation. Once Rutgers, Maryland, and Indiana, whomever else you want to name, are making twice as much as you are, then that financial competitiveness as pledged by the conference gets to be called into question, because they are not financially competitive on your behalf, and they own your rights. There's nothing you can do about it. You are hamstrung by the conference. You can't negotiate your own Florida State deal with ESPN or anybody else. So they have failed you. It's not an easy argument to make. I'm not even saying they would win, but it is probably somewhere down the road going to happen. The other viability, and I brought this up the other night, and I've brought it up a couple times, is for Florida State to find a way to more money so that it can ride out losing those rights, losing that revenue for 6 games per year for the next X amount of years. this morning they contracted with JP Morgan Chase to look at using their assets as collateral to get some financing for the athletic department, which would basically go into what amounts to an escrow fund, the equivalent of what they would lose by walking away from the grant of rights. That's a pretty risky venture. One, going in with a private equity, institution like that is risky in and of itself. The other part of it is, you have to have somewhere to go. Do we know they don't have an offer from the Big Ten? The Big Ten has not said, and they're not going to openly say, yeah, we'd love Florida State if they can get out. Florida State also not being an AAU academic school, which Tony Petitti has said they can look around. But it is still a priority. They still want it. It's not a demand, but they still want it. Florida State and Clemson are not AAU academic schools. Greg Sankey is fond of saying, we don't need to expand. We're fine where we are. Well, all commissioners say that until they're not. They all say it until they're not saying it anymore. Tony Petitti 2 weeks ago was saying, we don't need to expand anymore. We're good with what we've got. And here he is about to add, 2 more teams a week later. They all say that. So, from a footprint standpoint, they would fit in well with the SEC. I know Greg Sankey would certainly hear complaints from the University of Florida if Florida State were to get added. He would hear complaints about Clemson from the University of South Carolina. The question is, would he care? Would he still be able to get the 75% approval vote that he needs to add those? Greg Sankey gets pretty much what he wants from his membership. Ironically enough, he works for them, but it doesn't seem like that. It seems like quite the other way around. So, it's a possibility, but the fact that the fact that Florida State is being so vocal about it. I mean, they are, McCullough is making no bones about it. He's unhappy and he's going to make sure everybody knows about it. So he's pretty much pissing off a lot of his, fellow ACC membership at the same time.
So for the rest of the country, it looks like we have an idea what it's going to look like, meaning the Big Ten has these 18 and the SEC has 16. And then you add the other schools to the Big 12. I think they go to 16.
Correct.
Is where we would stand. And then the ACC, this grant of rights situation and this fight that Florida State's taking up and Clemson to a lesser degree is really going to dictate, obviously, that conference. If that somehow falls apart and there is interest, and I got to think that there would be interest for those kind of football schools from the SEC and or the Big Ten, then the ACC gets into a situation where, they become the Pac-12 of the East Coast. And then they're looking maybe to, use the American Conference in the way that people thought the Pac-12 would be using the Mountain West as, supplement, Tulane and Memphis and those kind of schools to try to survive.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. The key is to fill those holes, plug those gaps sooner rather than later, which is something Kliavkoff failed.
Did the Pac-12 not do that? Okay, yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's something Kliavkoff failed at. He was so set in his ways of, we're going to do the TV contract, then we're going to do the grant of rights, then we'll talk expansion. In the meantime, he's got San Diego State jumping up and down saying, hey, pick us. And he was like, just hold on, just sit tight. We'll get to that. It's too late now. You're conceivably by the end of this weekend, because again, this is moving quickly. Apple came, and this is something we just found out in the last 24 hours. When Apple presented the deal, they said, you have until the end of the weekend to get this done or the deal's off the table. Now, wow, this is a really bad deal. And yet you're setting those kinds of terms on it. and the Pac-12 is backed into a corner on it because they've got nothing else. Apple knew that the Pac-12 has got nothing else. There is no plan B. And so they knew they could do that. And so the time is running out quickly. And now San Diego State's buyout for the Mountain West, if they did want to go after they did the whole kiss and make up, and can we have our $6.5 million from the postseason from this past year? And they did the whole, kumbaya going back to the Mountain West. Are they really going to fork out the $34 million buyout that they have to get out of the Mountain West in time for next year? Because time is of the essence. If you're a playoff comp, you can't wait and say, well, we got this for a year. We're going to start planning for the future. There is no future. The future is 48 hours from now. That's what you've got. And then who else? You can't just say, well, we're going to add San Diego State. I mean, SMU, Tulane, all these other schools that have been mentioned. But here's the problem. These schools aren't blind. They follow social media. They have followed the path of what's gone on in the last 72 hours. All of these schools have walked away from this deal. Do they want to be the ones that are so desperate that they're like, well, it wasn't good enough for 1-11 Colorado, but we'll take it? Wow, that's, you got to believe at some point the security of the Mountain West is better than the unknown with the Pac-12. And that's a big statement to make.
Yeah, and the Big 12 was partially saved, maybe wholly saved by its mediocrity. And I say that with all due respect to the Big 12. No one wanted those entities after Oklahoma and Texas left. So they had time to go get the 4 that they added, and they're continuing to add that level of school.
But here's the other thing that happened, because we all sat here, oh my gosh, Oklahoma and Texas are leaving and the vultures are circling, and how long can the Big 12 survive? And a couple of things happened. The Pac-12 had the chance to go in and pillage, and they didn't. Missed opportunity. That wasn't good. You're not Carnegie Tier 1 academic school, so no thank you. Boy, flexibility was needed and not given. The other thing that happened is Bob Bowlesby, one of his last acts, and then going into the Brett Yormark era, went to their media partners and said, look, we realize the contracts are almost up. We realize that none of us really are in a good place to talk about what's new and what's next. They extended the media deals that they had. They weren't great deals, but they were good enough. And once you weren't talking about Oklahoma and Texas, the schools that were left were okay taking what was still there. They weren't going to get into well, we deserve this. And, the kind of conversations you're going to have with Texas and Oklahoma. Kansas State wasn't as worried about it. Iowa State wasn't as worried about it. So they extended the existing contracts so that they weren't put into a corner in the next negotiation. They bought themselves some time. They bought themselves some goodwill with those media partners while they negotiated the new deals. There was no reason why the Pac-12 couldn't have done the same thing with ESPN and Fox, but they let the clock run out on them.
And Tony, to sum up our conversation, I appreciate your time and appreciate you stopping by. Tony answering the call once again when I send it out, the bat signal for Tony. And again, last word on college football, folks. This sums it up here from Cougs Johnson. And this is the, college football collectively. I know they may not be thinking this consciously, but basically they don't believe that there are enough of these type of fans for it to matter.
You know what? I get it. And Cougs Johnson is probably feeling pretty wounded right now. The game of musical chairs is about to stop, and Washington State and Oregon State likely don't have a chair right now, at least not in the traditional Pac-12 sense or even the Pac-10. Those two schools, even going back to the Pac-8, and I get that, and I hate to see games like the Apple Cup or the Civil War in Oregon. I hate to see those games go by the wayside. That's part of what makes college football tremendous. You hope that there is a path somewhere in a year or two where even as out of conference games, those games can be, put back together because they matter. I think what the conferences and the networks are counting on is that in 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about college football. We're going to be talking about games. We're going to be talking about week 0. We're going to be talking about Hawaii and Vanderbilt. And somehow Vanderbilt is a 2-touchdown favorite in a college football game. And when does that ever happen? We're going to be having those conversations. Once the product is on the field, some of this other stuff is going to go by the wayside. Look, you and I know June into early July, it's usually a time when we can take a step back. You and I usually don't see each other much on this network during that time frame. And it has been an over the top 2 months. I know I've had almost no downtime, and training camp is now here, and it's time to kick it into a whole other gear. The college football world, the TV networks, the conference commissioners are counting on the fact that once the games start, this stuff is going to be in the rear view mirror, at least for a little bit. They're not naive. It won't be completely gone, but it won't be the top story every day of every week. They need these conversations to go away. And they need to put the product on the field, and, it will be soon enough. And those are the things that we'll be talking about at that point. I feel sorry for the people in the Big Ten office who went to all that work to put those schedules together for 2024. And you look at them and you're like, hey, wow, it's an interesting matchup. SC gets to play this and UCLA is going to play these games. Look at that. Well, that's kind of interesting. That'd be kind of fun. It's different. Throw those in the trash can, because now you got to reconfigure things, based on 2 more schools. And as much as the trend is to go to the divisionless football with this many teams, you can't. You've got to go back to divisions, especially with now 4 West Coast teams. Part of adding 2 more, again, going back to what we said a few minutes ago, is the finances, the travel. UCLA and USC are thrilled with this. There's going to be a few more weeks on their schedule where they're not having to go to Indiana or Northwestern or wherever. They get to just go up the coast like they have historically done. That helps everybody financially. So you're going to have to go back to divisions, and I can see a West division with doing it off the top, Iowa and Wisconsin and, Nebraska and at least 2 of the 4 Pac-12 schools, maybe all 4 of them, whatever the case may be. And then you have a few crossover games into the other division, and it works. I mean, as much as we don't like this, when you look at some of what these matchups are going to be, UCLA on a Saturday afternoon against Iowa at Kinnick Stadium, a sold-out Kinnick Stadium, no matter how bad the offense is going to be more compelling than a Saturday at 7:30 at night in Corvallis. It just is. And it's going to be better for TV. It's going to be better for the schools. My old colleague, Ben Bolch from the LA Times, one of my favorite colleagues when I was covering UCLA for 5 years, he asked Chip Kelly today, what do you think about all of these changes? And Chip said, look, it's really going to be okay for us because we've been told we won't have any games outside the Pacific time zone. We won't have any games that start past 3:30 in that local time zone, wherever we are. That's 12:30 to us in the Pacific time frame, or 1:30 at the latest. That's fine. We go, we play the game, we're done. We get on our chartered plane, we come back home like we would anywhere else. That's fine. The other sports, I get it. It's a concern having to, go spend a weekend somewhere else and whatever the case may be. And That's going to be a huge adjustment for a lot of teams. But the Big Ten also allocated some of its financial resources to help these teams be able to, handle, get the charter flights that they need. And, it's not like they're going to be standing in queue at Southwest Airlines at the ticket counter, waiting their turn to get on. There's going to be help to get them through it. But some of these matchups are going to be pretty darn compelling, seeing, if you've got some of the crossover with the Eastern Division or whatever they're going to call it. We hope they won't go back to calling it, what was it, Legends and Leaders or whatever that was a few years ago. You get the Eastern Division and, you get a Michigan out at, the Coliseum or, at Autzen Stadium up in Oregon, that's pretty compelling stuff. It really is. And so there's a lot of potential here. It's just hard getting you as college football fans. We don't handle change very well. I know I don't. We don't handle change well. We like our tradition and we like our stuff. And we like it the way it's been since our granddad was taking us to the games, decades ago. But one of the things that makes college football a niche sport, and it is a niche sport, there's a reason it doesn't have the mass worldwide audience of the NFL or NHL or baseball or anything else, is because the association is with the name on the front of the jersey. The association is you're a Penn State fan because you went to Penn State or your parents went to Penn State or you grew up going to Penn State games. And so no matter who's on the team, no matter how many people came in and out of the transfer portal, you like Penn State and you like the band and you like that really atrocious looking Nittany Lion guy with the scarf. He looks too, whatever. That's what you like. And so that's where your ties are to college football or the Buckeyes, because as a kid you went in and you saw Script Ohio with the band and the tuba guy dotting the I, and man, it was pretty awesome and you're hooked. That's what college football, that's where the college football fans get their audience. And to that Washington State person who chimed in a little while ago, that's what the commissioners are counting on, that you're still going to love the Michigan players running out and slapping their hands against the big blue sign, on their way out or whatever the case may be. Come Saturdays, you're still going to be hooked on that. And there's a good case to be made for it because through all these decades of changes, the game gets more viewers than ever before.
Tony, we appreciate you stopping by. We posted this how many months ago? So this is Oregon and Washington in the Big Ten, and this was my lineup. Let's see. I went, I explained my thought process. I even went through their records from 2022. And let's see. Here we go. No, okay. So I looked at this a couple different ways. That doesn't, I went that route. This must be a different video because actually I liked the 4-5-4-5 process where you keep everybody on the West Coast. Yeah, I'm going to have to find that. But anyway, keep everybody on the West Coast and you've got a 4-team Western Division. So they don't have to, run over to Nebraska and Iowa all the time. And then you've got 18 teams and you go 5-5-4-4 with the pods and it works out pretty easily.
Yeah. It easier than we would think. It's not reinventing the wheel to, reconfigure a couple of divisions. And I'm not diminishing all the hard work you put into it, but I'm sure the folks who did the schedule at the Big Ten a couple of weeks ago are going to be able to put this together. You will note, and I think that this matters, that when Tony Petitti asked for approval to begin discussions, and this was last night that he was asking this, that to begin conversations with Oregon and Washington, he got unanimous approval. Now, Tony Petitti's a smart guy. He's not going to ask the question if he doesn't already know that what he's going to get, right? He knew it would be at least close to unanimous, and if it wasn't, he would cover that over. It is expected when they take the formal vote, because as you and I sit here, the formal approval vote has not happened yet. The anticipation, because again, Tony Petitti knows how to count heads, it's a unanimous approval to bring Oregon and Washington in. It's unanimous. There isn't even a worry about the 75% or that he needs. I've seen some people on social media, and Big Ten, get ready for USC fans, because they're special. Of saying, well, they promised USC that Oregon wouldn't come in, and so we're going to have to be outspoken about this, and it's going to be an issue. Look, you're not even really an official member until end of June next year. So A, settle down, USC fan, and B, you don't get a vote anyway. So just settle down. The schools that are actually members are going to vote unanimously, just as they did with USC and UCLA, to accept it. And this is the start of the Tony Petitti era as commissioner of the Big Ten. And boy, what a start, especially when you compare it to what's going on the other side of the country. George Kliavkoff is in danger of having the shortest tenure as Pac 8, 10, 12 commissioner in the conference's history, and overseeing the end of the conference, in all potential. Look, the Pac 8 and then 10 and 12 was built off pillaging other conferences. It used to be, and I'm no Tony Altamore. I can't, quote the history of it, but it was built off pillaging the old Pacific Coast Conference and taking some of their best. And then later on, you added you pillaged the Mountain West by getting the Arizona schools. And then you hit the Mountain West again to get Utah, and the Big 8 to get Colorado. Maybe it was the Big 12 by then. But point being, the conference was built off pillaging other conferences. Now, unfortunately, it's happened to this conference for the first time in its history, and it's happened at such a level that it may be the end of the conference.
Also hits me that if you divide these divisions and or pods a certain way, it may, if you do it the right way, could avoid the issue that's being talked about in Ohio State, Michigan circles, that they play the last game of the regular season, then they play a Big Ten championship game, and then they could possibly play a playoff game. But if they're eliminating one another in a division situation, then maybe you can bypass that again. Sure. And they don't have to play in a Big Ten championship game and play 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. There is, because I agree. I don't want to see them playing back-to-back weeks like that. I agree.
I think it would be interesting once. If it happened once, it would be like, okay, this is kind of interesting to see them play the next week. But no, you don't want to see this like 3 times in 5 years. No.
Which is a distinct possibility with the way those two handle the Big Ten right now. It's a distinct possibility, and nobody wants to see that repeatedly. Nobody wanted to see Alabama have to play LSU in the national championship game after playing them in the conference championship game, and we got one of the most boring national championship games in recent history. So,
after we got one of the most boring regular season matchups between
exactly,
they just double dose of it.
Exactly.
They turned 9-6 into 21-0. So at least the first one was close. Just nobody could, see the end zone from where they were on the field.
Exactly. So look, it's tough for some of us old traditionalists, but this is the reality of the new world order. And in 3 weeks and 4 weeks, whenever it is you need me, we'll be on talking about college football. I'm glad for some of this to start to be done, because yes, I am loser enough that I was sitting here at midnight East Coast time, clicking on the link for the University of Washington Board of Regents meeting last night, because I needed to see what's happening. And after about 10 minutes, they went to closed executive session. They forgot to turn off the Zoom for a couple of minutes, and then they realized that they forgot. And I was like, I'm getting nothing. It was midnight, man. It's like I need to get a couple hours sleep around here. I've got I've got a Wake Forest article, on with interviews with the two defensive back coaches, talking about how they got beat deep so frequently last year, killing the defense. I got to get it done at some point. I needed all this, but I kept getting distracted by, all of this other stuff because look, we've never seen anything like it, in terms of schools have left, schools have changed, but the fervor of the pace of everything that's been happening over the last 72 hours has been like anything we've ever seen in the decades I've been watching college football.
Well, I'll tell you, Tony, that I did not put you in a scheduling conflict last night because I thought about going live, and then I was just like, when I saw all the rumors and everything coming out late last night, I was like, I've been doing this since 10 o'clock this morning. No. It's going to have to wait until tomorrow morning. It's just not happening.
Right.
No.
No, I totally get it. But I was sitting there ready to watch the university. Who schedules their Board of Regents meeting at 9:00 at night local time? But they did. And I was there ready to watch. So, it is what it is. And, so we know Arizona is gone. They're on board. That was a given, especially as outspoken as they were about how horrendous the media deal was. So we can expect Arizona State and Utah to join soon thereafter.
And Tony, this is a conversation for another time. I'll get to some other calls, and I want to respect your time.
Sure.
But I got to say, and this will not hit me nearly as hard as it's going to hit you, but I've already processed the USC UCLA game this year, thinking regardless of what's at stake on the field, it'll just have that eerie feel to it that this is the last USC UCLA game in the Pac-12. And
Right.
now it's going to be possibly the entire schedule of games.
Mm-hmm.
Those final couple weekends, we'll be thinking, okay, the last Apple Cup game in who knows how long, and the last Civil War, Oregon State, and all those it's just going to be this eerie feeling.
And it's interesting as a media person who covered UCLA in the Pac-12 for 5 years. You look out there, and it was great traveling to Rice-Eccles Stadium in Utah. It's a great venue in, mid-November on a Saturday night for a college football game, cold as the dickens, but a great venue. And so when you start to think about, it's the last time they're going to play Utah there, look, they can do out of conference games against any of these schools. But for some, it's the last. Oregon State just underwent this huge renovation at Reser Stadium, which is being unveiled this year. And, now it's going to be like, well, that'll be nice when you play New Mexico State or, whoever you get in, the Mountain West, whatever the case may be. So you get some of those that are going to get lost in some of these great venues to travel to and things of that nature. But, look, if you're a college football fan, if you're a West Coast, if you're a fan of the two LA schools or or Oregon or Washington, the idea of getting to go to the Big House, getting to go to the Horseshoe, getting to go to Kinnick Stadium, any of that, it got to be pretty exciting. Yeah, it's a longer trip, but hey, you know what? It's worth it. I've been to an Ohio State game in person. I've seen the Script Ohio. And I promise you, if you haven't been there, I promise you, it is all that. It is not just a bunch of hype. It is one of the coolest things you'll ever see. Just the precision of everything. And if you like college football, you probably generally like it for more than just the football, because part of college football is all the stuff that goes with it, the tailgating, the bands, the traditions, the venues, right? We talk about venues in college football much more than when you do in pro football. You talk about a couple of venues, Arrowhead is really loud, or, Seattle's really loud. College football, the venue is a big topic every week for a lot of games. So the opportunities for some of the former Pac-12 school fans to go to some of these new places got to be pretty exciting. It's I've been to a couple of them in the Big Ten, and it's worth it. It is absolutely worth it. So there is a lot of upside if you're, willing to venture out there. One of the things that ensured the problems with the Pac-12 is that even if it was just Arizona, and let's say none of the other schools left, right? You were down to 8 schools, which gives you 7 conference games. That's only a 10-game schedule. When you add in the out-of-conference games, you were going to having to be scrambling to find more out-of-conference games for next season, and things don't happen that quickly. And you were going to wind up with 7 conference games and 5 out of conference, and that doesn't work. It's a moot point now with Oregon and Washington leaving, and whatever. There's no way to expand quickly enough for next year unless you can get to 8 teams, by the end of Sunday, get them to sign all this stuff and just make it up from there. But there's a lot of good stuff to come out of this if you're willing to be open-minded about this is the here and now, and just look at the games and look at what's in front of you.
Yeah, the matchups are going to be phenomenal. And I do look forward, for as much as I don't like the direction that college football is going, and I would reverse it to 1995. Let's get the Southwest Conference involved. Pre-1995,
Right.
instantaneously. Yes,
Sure.
seeing Penn State at the Rose Bowl and
Yep.
Michigan at the Coliseum and
Yep.
vice versa. All those. Yeah.
Going up to Autzen, where if you're a Big Ten fan and you've never been to Autzen, let me tell you, it's insanity. It's only 45,000 people there, but they are on top of you like they're in your living room, and it is loud and it is insane. Seattle, Washington, one of the most beautiful college football venues you'll ever see, and all of the bleacher seats, they're all aluminum all the way around, and there are the partial tops over the seats, and it's done intentionally. So when the fans are stomping on those seats, it echoes in that place like crazy. And, even the press box shakes from it. It's some new experiences. And so it's, once we start playing college football in 3 weeks, you'll get through this season and then start thinking about the future and what's possible and planning some pretty cool trips for some road games.
And I could take a shot at the ACC by saying if Florida State and Clemson join the Big Ten, they'll be actually going to road games where, they have to deal with crowd noise. And
Yeah, there's not a lot of that in the ACC. I got to tell you, I am making my first trip ever this year to Blacksburg. And so that,
yes,
there's a value in that trip. But yeah, there's not a lot where it's an over the top experience in the ACC. North Carolina State's fun, and it's fine. The students get all into it and everything, but it doesn't compare to some of these other places that are just, like I said, over the top in terms of the fan involvement. So it's there's not as much in the ACC.
Tony Siracusa, last word on college football, folks. Check out the banner right there. That way you can follow Tony on Twitter at Tony Bruin. And again, it's last word on college football. They've been so good to me throughout the years. Tony, Kevin, and the rest of the crew there at Last Word. Tony, appreciate you being here as always.
Glad to do it, Mark. You know the drill. Send out the bat signal when you need me.
That's it.
All right, man. Be well.
All right, Tony. Have a good day. All right, let's keep it going here at the Voice of College Football. I apologize to the callers on the line. That went a little long, but I did invite Tony to jump on and give his perspective. He is a voter for all the major awards. He's been in the Football Writers Association forever and is just a great knowledge base for anything concerning the landscape of college football. I did want to address this real quick, and we will get to all the super chat contributions. Thank you so much for all of those. We love those, honor those. Thank you so much for your contributions. I will answer all the super chats. I did want to, I've lost track of the comment now about that the Apple Cup won't be canceled. I hope you're right. But consider this. If Washington playing in the Big Ten is playing 9 conference games, they've got 3 other conference games. They will play 1 power brand, and they will play 2 FCS/Group of 5 games. That's going to be the formula. These conference schedules are going to be too difficult for teams to be taking on 2 difficult non-conference games. Don't be surprised, Washington State fan, if Washington says, we're not going to see you every year. No, because that's going to lock in their schedule. Just saying. Not saying for sure. Just don't be surprised. Got our buddy Jackson on the line. Jackson, welcome in. Sorry for the wait.
Sorry, Mark. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty well, although I am a bit saddened by the plight of the Pac-12, but they partially did it to themselves.
Yeah. I mean, all the mistakes that have been made since 2010, I mean, it bit them in the rear, unfortunately. It's sad, but, they're going the way of the old Big East and the WAC and the Southwest Conference.
They are.
Yeah. I just really hope, like everyone's saying, nothing's happening to the Apple Cup, but it's like you said, Oregon and Washington will probably go with the 1 Power 5 non-con game, and 2 of the non-con games will be Group of 5 and FCS. But I mean, I just wish it would be 1 Power 5 game, and the other Power 5 game can be their annual rival, like for Oregon, Oregon State, and Washington State. But don't know if that'll happen, but I'm hoping that happens.
Yeah, I would like to see all those games continue, but understand again, look at Oklahoma's situation. They're not going to play Oklahoma State going forward, and they've got 4 non-conference games. So they've got little excuse. But Texas A&M ceased to continue to play when A&M left the Big 12. So I'm just telling Cougar fans, unless there's been something, and I doubt if they're really dealing with that right now, considering Washington, the ink is still wet on the contract with the Big Ten, or probably not even signed. So right. Don't hold your breath on the Apple Cup or any of these rivalry games that are now out of conference games continuing. And then don't come back at me if they do continue and say, Mark said that they're not continuing. I'm not saying that they're not for sure. I'm just saying don't be surprised, because the math does not add up.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there are so many memorable games from the Apple Cup and the Oregon State, Robert. I mean, including last year for Oregon State. I mean, that 4th quarter comeback by Oregon State, that was magnificent. So, I mean, oh, man. And, I mean, we go from Arizona to the Big 12 to this. I mean, it's just holy cow. What a big day for college football news.
But see, here again, Cougs Johnson is saying, no offense, but the Apple Cup is played every year for 110 straight years. Well, do you realize that the Pac-12 has been played for over 100 years too? And most likely there's not going to be a Pac-12. So things change. I don't care if it's been played a million years in a row. It may not be played going forward. Again, that is not a prediction. I'm just letting you know that could be the state of things. Yes, there's a Southwest Conference for 80 years, but it ceased to exist. So things change.
That's the way it goes. I mean, and it was like you and Tony said, we college football fans do not do well with change.
Few people do well with change. And again, I'm going to go back to the well to say, if there was one way in which college football should have mirrored the NFL, and I don't know who was going to be the person or group of people to spur this and get this kind of cooperation, but there needs to be a commissioner or a governing body in college football to do what's best for the sport.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, oh man. It was just, I have no words for this at the moment, because it's like, but on the bright side, we're not going to have to wait till 2032 for Oregon, Ohio State to play.
No.
So, I mean, there's that. And we know that Washington, Michigan State will be pretty big this year. I mean, I don't know what topic will be. I mean, they're just going to be like, oh, future conference game, Washington, Michigan State. It's pretty funny to think about, but if people said this was going to happen 20 years ago, we'd have been like, no, that's not going to happen.
No, we would have never foreseen this because we were tied to geography, and geography makes sense, but we no longer have that.
No. I mean, I wonder what this does for the playoff field because, I mean, I know that they're going to 12 teams starting in 2024. I wonder if they're sticking with that in, say, 2030 or 2036. I mean, I know it's a little too far out in the future, but it's just, who knows if we're going to 16 because of this.
Going to 16 teams?
Yeah, because of like all this realignment.
I don't really see where that has an impact. I think they'll go to 16 because they want to make more money. In terms of this impacting it, if anything, there are going to be less teams competing for the playoff because you're going to have less conferences and you're going to have possibly the likes of Syracuse and Wake Forest and Boston College becoming American Conference teams at some point, and you're going to have a smaller universe of teams. So I don't know why we would expand the playoffs, except for, of course, just to make more money.
Right. I mean, anything can happen, but on the bright side, we got 22 days until kickoff of week 0 and 27 days until week 1.
That we do. All right. Anything else, Jackson?
That's about all. I just wanted to end this call on a happier note about how we're getting closer to kickoff.
That's right.
And thank you for having me on as always, Mark.
Yep. Call back anytime.
That's the plan.
All right. Here we go. Voice of College Football. Use the link in the description section. And again, keep in mind that when you shop Amazon, use the link that we provide in the description section of all the videos. It's the same shopping experience. We've tested it a million times, and it will work for you. Therefore, it works for us, and it helps us grow and build the channel. We don't want to be the Pac-12 of college football channels on YouTube. Help us. That should be the new motto here. We don't want to be the Pac-12 of college football YouTube channels. So help us be the Big Ten and not the Pac-12. All right. We've got Raining Blue.
It's Robert France once again.
There's Robert. What's going on, man?
Not much. Just been keeping track of the college football realignment. When is the vote for the adding Oregon and Washington? What time would they be doing that vote?
The vote? I don't know. Does anyone in the chat know that?
Yeah, I've been looking. I couldn't even find it. So that was the only.
Okay. Yeah, you got me.
Oh, yeah, because if the vote's not done, it's not final yet until that happens.
Well,
and I've been telling people that you can't judge with the Oregon and Washington being in lock until that happens, and it's confirmed.
Well, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. If it's a what if, it's no problem.
That's what the report is, though, that not that they're just. So I would think that since they've scheduled a vote, that they know which way the vote's going to go. I doubt if they would schedule a vote without having enough conversations to know, okay, this is the way the vote's going to go, as opposed to, this vote's up in the air, because they don't need to. There's no urgency.
Of course. Or they want more time so they can grease some hands to get the votes they need, too. That's another reason why. I'm not arguing with that. I'm like trying to figure out what ways would the reason why they would either delay a vote until later on in the day so they can do that. That would make sense. Trying to make everything logically sense is the number one thing I'm thinking. That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and they've already cleared out the issue of the revenue distribution. They're going to give them a lot less money, so it's not going to cost anyone any money. Yeah, I don't know. I've looked around a little bit, but I don't see that.
Yeah, it seems like they eliminated most of the concerns. That's my main thing is if it eliminates all their concerns and they can vote them in, okay. If not, okay again.
So, Robert, what else you got?
Well, pretty much I've been looking through the Penn State's roster and everything. Getting pretty excited for Penn State this year. After seeing a little bit of clips of some of the players that Penn State has, it seems like it's going to be a good season for Penn State.
What's a good season for you?
I would say at best 1 loss season, at worst 2 loss season, maybe even 3.
Okay.
I'm realistic about it.
Yeah, that's realistic. When you said a good season for Penn State, I think everyone's got them in the top 5 to 8 in the country. So that's what we're all expecting.
And plus, the way I've been hearing on recruiting and everything else, I'm like, oh, there's finally starting to recruit some big defensive linemen and everything. I'm like, yeah, that you're talking my language because that's what I run on is defense.
Yeah, so if they beat everyone in the Big Ten like they did last year, except Ohio State and Michigan, and lose those 2 games again, then they're
right where they were last year.
They've been, yeah. So that's what it's going to come down to for me.
Even if they beat one of them, at least Ohio State or Michigan, I prefer Ohio State. But if you can't beat Ohio State and you beat Michigan, that's perfectly fine with me.
Absolutely. Okay, Robert, anything else?
Nothing much else about that.
All right. Well, I appreciate you stopping by.
No problem.
Have a good day.
Same to you. Bye.
All right. Voice of College Football breaking things down. Again, Washington and Oregon to the Big Ten. We don't know when the exact vote will take place. If you've seen that, then certainly leave that in the chat. Curious to see what this quote is from Washington State President Kirk Schultz and Athletic Director Pat Chun. While we had hoped that our membership would remain together, this outcome was always a possibility, and we have been working diligently to determine what is next for Washington State athletics. We've prepared for numerous scenarios, including our current situation. Go to the Mountain West. Pac-12 currently, yes, Arizona State, Utah, you've got to think they're gone. We've talked about that threshold. The Big 12 was in this place 2 years ago. They were at a threshold and they added before any subtractions. What has happened here with the Pac-12 is the other way around. They haven't had anywhere to really go to add, although, let me step back just a second. They botched San Diego State. They seem to be on the cusp of bringing in SMU, but they, for whatever reason, they believed a media rights deal needed to be in play before adding those 2, where it was certainly evident by the communications from San Diego State to the Mountain West that they already banked on and believed that they were part of the Pac-12. Oh, the Pac, we could write a book on the Pac-12 missteps. Coddled USC and held their hand when they knew that they were vulnerable in losing USC, ignored the opportunities to go out and grab Big 12 schools. The Pac-12 made the huge assumption and the ill-guided assumption that their entities, their schools, their member institutions were secure and staying. Therefore, they could just stay put, and then at their timing, on their calendar, they could start to go out and figure out what should we add to the conference. No. You need to understand in life what you can control and what other people can control and what nobody can control. There's those 3 facets of life. What do you control? What do other people control? and what does nobody control, and then you have to act accordingly. And they were moving in a world that was circa years and years and years ago of things staying the same and moving slowly. No, the information age, and with the money being on the line at the rate that it is, things are moving fast, and the Pac 12 did not jump when they had it all in front of them. Alex is on the line. Alex, what's going on today?
It's finally ending. And regardless of how we do right now, and I'll get to us in a second. Just get it over with and move on. Just turn the page. So, this isn't surprising to anybody who knew this thing would become undone, because I knew since last summer eventually this would come undone, and now it is becoming undone. And it's sort of how we on Twitter. There's been like a quick flip from folks of, you had the usual like, Cal, Stanford, don't bring anything to anybody, whatever, get out of here. And now there's folks starting to recognize, Stanford having to hang out in the Mountain West. Wait a second, this doesn't. It's sort of that thing where you watch the zombie apocalypse on your TV, but then if you see a Walking Dead outside your front door and you realize the world's actually ending, oh wait a second, is this what we actually want? So, just now waiting for Arizona to announce, and then ASU. I think we get now what their story is. Michael Crow, he had this funny illusion of, hey, we can try to hang on with Cal and Stanford, and we're like, and people are like, what's that? We don't know what he's thinking. That guy, smarter heads in Tempe are going to prevail there, and they'll be on their way. And then there's just Utah, and then turn out the lights. It will be fun. So I will like to see how the Pac-12 officially ends its business once you're left with 4.
Mm-hmm.
So, because at that point, you can't buy out anybody. Apple pulled its deal, so that's over. And so now the question is, if Apple is now free now to talk to anybody, why not talk to the Big Ten and try to work in Cal and Stanford as as an additional partner and what have you. So at this point, I'm just not concerned with what transpires over the next how many weeks, months, as far as we can finally start looking at the new landscape.
Yeah, and so Cal goes Mountain West, or they go independent, or they go Big Ten.
Yeah, it's really about, because again, the Cal and Stanford, nothing for the last 12, 13 months. Nothing. So even a tweet from whoever would be more than what we've seen, because there's been absolutely, completely, totally nothing. We know the big presidents want us. The only question is, where does the money come from? It's sort of the inverse of Oregon and it is kind of Oregon and Washington. They said they did the vetting and they're figuring out the money. With Cal and Stanford, it could be pretty quick, because whatever dollar value there has to be, the dollar value doesn't have to be anything. It can be, it's literally pennies. So if we can bring them in for nothing, then why not? Right. And close out the West Coast and all that. So, and again, we have, I see in the comments here, the big presidents want us. If it's the average college football fan may not care about Cal and Stanford, but the big presidents want us.
Yes.
So
yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just not really concerned right now. I just want to see the unwinding, and then finally we can actually start having, somebody say something and get that going, because so far it's been nothing. Just have the whole thing come down and start again. So, But yeah, well, because and it will be fascinating. Like if Cal and Stanford actually do decide to hang out in the Mountain West for a while, that will be the most peculiar. Like that's almost unimaginable. But if and I don't know if the leadership vacuum at Stanford may just fall back to that for a season or two, but I think longer term we kind of know where things will head, and so that's why as long as we have that confidence, I don't think it really matters what we do. And I was thinking independence for a while if we had to, but if Stanford's on the same, we don't have a boat. If we're now just kind of adrift, then we'll then we'll be adrift for maybe a few seasons, but and so there you go. But longer term, I think we'll be fine. It's just these next few seasons, if they're rather, or maybe by 2024, Apple TV comes in. Maybe Apple TV comes in 2 weeks and says we can do this. Done. Because with the big presidents, they could clear that in a hurry. So that's just the only that's the only question. So, but I have to get back to work. But I wouldn't say it's been a fun day, but it's we can finally start moving forward. That's all I want. Just let's get going here.
It's intriguing. I'll say that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'll say that. Well, Alex, thanks for taking time out of your day to give us a call.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'll be watching. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Cal fan Alex wondering what his Golden Bears future looks like. Let's run through this super chat. We'll get to all of them. Thank you, everyone. Domer Wop says Apple Cup is not unlike Cy-Hawk game, Iowa State in 2 different conferences, or Rocky Mountain Showdown, Colorado and Colorado State. Well, first of all, Colorado State's not in the Big 12. They're in the Mountain West, and Colorado, yes, Pac-12 to the Big 12. Regardless, I get your point. The point I'm making is that the Apple Cup game and the Civil War games are not guaranteed. We have seen rivalries go by the wayside. And just because you're stating that they've been played for 100 years, there have been other games in college football that have been played for 100 years that no longer exist or exist on a limited basis. So I don't want your games to go away. I want all the rivalries in college football to remain. I'm just warning you that that may not be the case. Washington's going to play 9 games in the Big Ten. Therefore, they're only going to have 3 non-conference games. They are not going to play more than 1. With the difficulty of a Big Ten conference schedule, I don't see them going out to schedule 2 difficult games, 2 Power 5 games. Therefore, they're not going to go, most likely not going to play Washington State every year. I might be wrong. And again, I'm not saying you took it the wrong way. I said it's possible that the rivalry series could end. All right. Trojan Conquest comes your way every Sunday night at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific time with our guy, Tim. Tim, what's going on tonight?
So it looks like we're going to get the Pac-12 guys together and we're going to do a quick, well, not quick, actually a full-on show to talk about this big move. And obviously it looks like the very end of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
So,
just tell me when to get out of the way.
No, get out of the way. We're going to do it at 3:00 Pacific. So that'd be 6 Eastern.
Okay.
So in a couple of hours.
All right.
Yeah, it should be good. We're just to break it all down. I mean, a lot of the stuff has, that's been leading up to this has made sense now recently. And we're going to go into the fact, talking about that network, we thought the networks were guiding football. Now more than ever, these moves that we're starting to see are really starting to show just how much a role they actually, that physically did play in all of this. And quite frankly, it's starting to look dirtier and dirtier, to be honest. But that's just the way this stuff goes, right? We always knew this was about, football turned to money a long time ago with all the regionality being removed and everything else. So this is just one more big final step. So we're going to talk about that, talk about Big 12, talk about the Big 10 today at 3 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Eastern.
There it is. We've got a banner already cooked up for us there. The Pack Chat Show is coming up 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific.
But they have to tune in to the USC channel in order to see it. It's not going to be on any of the other channels. Not on Oregon, not on the national. It's just going to be the USC channel. So
really,
you guys, so if you guys want to come check it out, that's what we're doing. Yeah,
on the USC channel, folks. So get the word out there, everyone. Help me, help our programming department here, our promotions department on the USC channel. Tim declares. There we go.
Yeah, we're not gonna split it up 3 or 4 different ways. We're just gonna do it on one channel. That way, because the problem is, Mark, is, as you know, trying to police 3 different chats, it gets a bit difficult. So that's just the way it is. We welcome everybody. We welcome everyone to come in. We just want to make sure that we can have a salient conversation. So feel free to join us if you'd like.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate you putting that together, and we will join you in just about 90 minutes, right? There we go.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome.
See you guys then.
Thanks, Tim. Now I'm looking forward to that. The Pack Chat Show. I have to correct my muscle memory wants to say the Pac-12 Chat Show, but it's the Pack Chat Show. And it's a short-lived show at this point. It's going to be morphed into something different. But the Pack Chat Show is coming up in 90 minutes, 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific on the USC channel. All right. Good stuff. Let me get to Super Chats. And I hope you guys realize how appreciative I am of all these Super Chats. Thank you so much for the contributions. And also want to mention that we've got a merchandise line here at the Voice of College Football. We're going to make those posts available that you can follow the link and get your Voice of College Football merch. The Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. And I got to say, everyone, whether it winds up being just Washington, Oregon, or if it's Washington, Oregon, Cal, Stanford, or if it's Washington, Oregon, Notre Dame, Stanford, there's a number of configurations we could land on. I probably posted a video slicing and dicing up the Big Ten in a number of ways. I certainly did. So we may repackage those, look them over, make sure that they're on point, and repackage and re-deliver those videos and maybe add some other options. We've also posted videos here in the last few months sizing up, talk about a visionary, the Arizona Wildcats against the Big 12, Utah versus the Big 12, how they fared in recent years and how they project forward in the Big 12. We also looked at Colorado against the Big 12. We've done the same with Washington and Oregon against the Big 10. Check out those videos. And again, I may repackage those, give them a look, make sure, maybe add some information and send those back out. So be looking out for that content. All right, we got a Discord link that you can talk college football 24/7, 365 if you become a Patreon member, patreon.com/MarkRogersTV, or a YouTube member. Either one, you don't have to be both. Pick either one, patreon.com/MarkRogersTV, or right here on the main channel, become a YouTube member, and you can join the Discord 24/7, 365. Tim, let me know if you want in. Otherwise, I know you're working on things. Oh, there you are.
Actually, I screwed up. We are splitting up on channels, but it's not the USC channel because this isn't a USC type of show. This is a Pac-12 show, so it's going to be on the national channel. My bad on messaging.
Just on the national channel. You're in
Correct.
a good place, everyone, right here. Just keep it locked in right here. I kind of wondered about that, but I thought, hey, USC still in the Pac-12, so
yeah, no, I
let that go.
I'm used to doing everything on the USC channel, so then I said just on one channel, but my mistake on the messaging. Rick, Tony, and I, it's a Pac-12 show, so it's going to be on the national channel because it's a Pac thing. Sure, it affects USC, but more likely it's going to be most of this conversation is going to be about the Pac-12 and what's going on in the Pac-12. So we don't want to pigeonhole to USC.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. Everybody keep it locked in here right at the national channel for the Pack Chat Show coming up at 6 Eastern and 3 Pacific. All right, let's get to these super chats. And again, Discord 24/7 365 college football talk, patreon.com/MarkRogersTV, or you get the YouTube membership right here. I will send you the link when you let me know that you've joined. I don't think there's any other way that I can contact you. I need your email address if you join here on YouTube. Erica, the Big Ten needs to be renamed the Big 20. Go Hawks. It's a brand name, Erica. They don't want to rename it the Big 20 because by that time it's going to be the Big 22 or 24. So go Hawks, hashtag tight end you. And that is the truth. Today and past 10 to 15 years, tight end you, Iowa, no question. Let's see. We've got David. Thank you so much for the contribution. If you go to a 3 division, 6 teams in each division, gives you 5 division games, and 2 schools each from other 2 divisions can play every one in 3 years, 9 conference games total. All right. Again, too much for me to decipher here. I've got to put it down on paper, look at it. I've delivered all this stuff, but it sounds reasonable. Yes, you got 5 games in your division. You need to play 4 other games. Yes, 2 schools each from the other 2 divisions. I think that's basically what I lined up in many of these videos. If you look up anything involving Washington, Oregon, Big Ten realignment, new Big Ten schedule, any of that stuff, or the new Big Ten, there's about 6 or 8 videos I posted where I have taken different combinations of the Big Ten and provided the way I would line it up. David, thank you so much for the contribution. That is very nice of you. I'm going to make sure, because I possibly missed some super chats the other night, not many, maybe 1 or 2, that we want to recognize everyone. So I will certainly look through that, and we will have some kind of roll call of super chats. Daniel says, at the end of the day, Ohio State 8 national championships, Georgia 4. Okay, that's certainly applicable to today's conversation. Thanks, Daniel. The incomparable Uncle Lou chiming in. No matter how many teams the Big Ten adds, Ohio State is still 5-13 against the SEC and 0-2 against UGA. They are. That is what the record shows. It is not a good showing by Ohio State against the SEC. It's a poor showing for what could be argued the best football program of all time. That's arguable. Alabama, Ohio State, USC. I don't know that anybody else really has a claim past those 3. I think those are the 3 that have the claim. And of course, Alabama's got the modern national championships too. If you're a national championship person, Ohio State's got the winning percentage and another bunch of metrics. And of course, USC, you can go to their eras of dominance. And I think USC has certainly peaked the highest. John McKay, John Robinson, Pete Carroll. Those teams have been all-time great teams. We've got Jason here. Good to see you. Michigan, Jason. It's looking like Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah to the Big 12, and Washington, Oregon, Clemson, Florida State to the Big 10. Yeah, and that's not necessarily a fair fight right there. You've got basically a baseline if you're looking at the additions to those 2 conferences. For anybody in the Big 12 that would think that they're in any way close to the Big 10, yes, this pretty much would dismiss that conversation. You're basically adding, if you're the Big 12, you're adding a top 15 program in Utah. Then you're adding 3 what have typically been anywhere from top 30 to 60 programs usually in that 40 range with the other 3. Of course, Colorado has been the worst in the Pac-12 during their time there. And then the Big Ten is adding Clemson, one of the elite programs in college football over the last 10 years. Florida State, one of the elites of the last 40 years. Oregon, a top 15 program. Washington, roughly a top 15 to 25 program. All right, we've got Packer 910. Can someone explain how Florida State and CU get out of the Clemson, get out of the grant of rights if the ACC is not willing to negotiate that? Doesn't involve years of litigation. Of course, we did get to that, and we've got Domer Wop coming back. Rest in peace to the Rose Bowl. This is awful too. That, man, I grew up with the Pac-10 and the Big Ten matching up in the Rose Bowl, and it's not been the same during the college football playoff era anyway, because that's been taken away from us every other year, every third year, whatever the rotation. So it's already somewhat dead. So, they're going to call these playoff games the Rose Bowl and the Orange Bowl and the Peach Bowl. They're not bowl games. They're playoff games. They just happen to be in the same city as these traditional bowl games. They're not even played in the original stadiums. There's not even a Peach Bowl. There's not a Gator Bowl stadium left to play in, for example. The Gator Bowl was an actual stadium in Jacksonville. Now they play in the NFL stadium. The Cotton Bowl was an actual stadium in Dallas, the Cotton Bowl. Well, now they play the Cotton Bowl at an NFL stadium. And on and on and on and on and on. The only one that's lived up to it since then has been the Rose Bowl in terms of matching stadium and name of game. It's sad. It's pathetic. The Rose Bowl's dead. Dead. You are right, Domer Wop. JT Sports, Arizona just got admitted into the Big 12. As soon as I saw that, JT Sports, I looked around just to try to get confirmation on that. I did not see it when that came down. Today says, is this move the Big Ten telling the NCAA they are irrelevant? I think that there have been consistent reminders and confirmations to the NCAA in recent years that it's irrelevant, especially in this day and age of NIL, in which they are afraid to police because of litigation. All right, you guys are amazing. And keep in mind, in just about an hour, we will have the Pack Chat show right here at the Voice of College Football. So thanks so much for stopping by. Oregon, Washington to the Big Ten. That is reported and confirmed, even though it's not finalized. Arizona to the Big 12. Again, reported but not finalized. Arizona State and Utah are reported to be going Big 12. And then that leaves Stanford, Cal. That leaves Oregon State and Washington State. You would think that Wazoo and Oregon State would be headed to the Mountain West, you would think, and Stanford, Cal. That's a big dynamic there that could play out a number of ways. Big Ten, Mountain West, you wouldn't think. The culture is just not a match. I can't imagine Stanford, but hey, look at where we are. Desperate times involve desperate measures. Or, as I uttered last night, because it crossed my mind, and then Tony confirmed it today, don't be surprised if Stanford goes independent. Stanford and Cal going independent. All right, keep it locked in here at the Voice of College Football. The Pack Chat show is coming up in 1 hour, 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will continue to watch the landscape of college football, and we'll be right here for you. We will have tons of videos coming out related to everything that's going on concerning these schools and their competitive nature in these conferences and what that is going to look like, and then all the proposed moves of the likes of Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and others, and what that looks like. Those videos are already posted, actually, with Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and how those schools would play and project versus the Big Ten and the SEC. So check out those videos, and we will leave them pinned in this particular live stream for your enjoyment. That's what it's all about. Your enjoyment. You're the fan. We can only do so much. When they screw up the sport, we will at least provide context to how they're screwing up the sport. All right. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you next time. Pack chat shows coming up next.